She pressed both hands flat against her chest, not to pray, not to steady herself, but to keep her heart from tearing straight through her ribs. The man she had traveled 900 miles to marry took one look at her, turned his back, and walked away without a single word. Clara Whitmore stood alone on that burning platform, with every eye in Red Valley burning holes through her skin, and she made a decision that would reshape both her life and the life of a broken cowboy who had long since stopped believing anyone was coming. If this story moves you, please subscribe to our channel and follow Clara's journey all the way to the end. And drop a comment telling us what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story has traveled. The train platform at Red Valley, Arizona, baked under a July sun that had no mercy and offered none. Clara Whitmore stepped off the train at 10:30 in the morning, with a brown leather suitcase in one hand, a folded letter in the other, and every intention of beginning again. She was 24 years old. She had dark auburn hair pinned at the nape of her neck, green eyes that missed nothing, and a figure that the world had spent her entire life reminding her it found unacceptable. She was full and round and solid, the kind of woman who filled a doorframe and who strangers felt entitled to comment on as though she were livestock at auction. She had learned early that the world would always have something to say about her body. She had also learned, slowly and painfully, that the world's opinion and the truth were two entirely different things. She had answered an advertisement in the Missouri Gazette 6 months prior. Rancher in Arizona Territory, age 38, seeks Christian woman of good character and practical skills for the purpose of marriage and home building. Reply to Box 114, Red Valley Post. Clara had replied. She had been honest in her letter. She described her cooking, her ability to manage a household budget, her experience with vegetable gardens, her skill with livestock from her years on her father's farm. She had been honest about her age. She had been honest about her situation. A woman alone in Kansas City after the death of her mother, with little family remaining and fewer prospects. She had not sent a portrait. She had been raised to believe that character spoke louder than appearance, and she had foolishly trusted that a man who cited Christian values in his advertisement might agree. His name was Douglas Hale. His letters had been warm and deliberate. He had written about his cattle operation, his 300 acres, his desire for a partner who understood hard work. He had signed his third letter with sincerity and anticipation, and Clara had pressed that paper between her palms and let herself feel something she had denied herself for years. Hope. She had packed her belongings into one suitcase. She had sold the rest. She had purchased a train ticket that consumed the last of her savings from 3 years of seamstress work. She had traveled from Kansas City to Arizona Territory with nothing behind her and something she believed was ahead. Douglas Hale was waiting at the far end of the platform in a tan suit with a watch chain across his vest. He was exactly as he had described himself, tall, lean, clean-shaven, with the bearing of a man accustomed to a degree of prosperity. He was scanning the arriving passengers with an expression of careful evaluation. And when Clara stepped off the train and their eyes met across the platform, she watched his face do something she recognized immediately. She had seen it before. The calculation, the assessment. The moment a person looked at her and began deciding what her body meant about her worth. She walked toward him anyway. Her chin was up. Her shoulders were back. She had survived 24 years of those looks, and she was not going to flinch at this one. She extended her hand as she reached him. "Mr. Hale," she said, "I'm Clara Whitmore. It's a genuine pleasure to finally meet you in person." Douglas Hale looked at her hand. Then he looked at her face. Then his eyes traveled down and back up in a way that made her skin feel like it had been scraped with gravel. "Miss Whitmore," he said, and his voice had lost every quality it had possessed in those letters. He did not take her hand. "I see," he said. Those two words carried the full weight of what he meant. She heard them clearly. "I see that you did not send a portrait because you knew what I would have said. I described myself honestly in my letters," Clara said. Her voice stayed level. She had learned long ago that trembling voices gave cruel people exactly what they wanted. I described my skills and my character and my intentions. You described yourself, Douglas said, but not completely. I described everything that matters. He looked at her with something between discomfort and annoyance, as though she were arguing a point that he considered already settled. I don't think this arrangement will suit either of us, he said. I apologize for any inconvenience. Then he tipped his hat as though that were adequate, and walked away down the platform steps and disappeared into the street without looking back. Clara stood where he had left her. Around her she was aware of the platform, the other passengers moving past, a porter with a cart, 2 women near the station door who had been close enough to hear and who were now exchanging glances with the particular expression of people who have witnessed something they will discuss at supper. She was aware of all of it. She allowed herself exactly 3 seconds. In those 3 seconds, she felt the full force of everything, the humiliation, the loneliness, the 900 miles of hope evaporating in the Arizona heat, the terror of standing in a strange town with an empty purse and nowhere to go. She felt it completely. She did not push it away or pretend it wasn't there. Then she picked up her suitcase. She walked to the end of the platform, sat down on a wooden bench in the narrow strip of shade beside the station wall, opened her suitcase, and took out her small leather wallet. She counted what was inside. $11.40. She had $11.40 in a town where she knew no one, in a territory she had never visited, with no ticket back and no home to return to, even if she had one. She sat with that for a moment. Then she closed the wallet, folded her hands in her lap, and began to think. The town of Red Valley ran along a single main road with a general store, a livery stable, a church, a saloon, a barber, a seamstress shop, and a hotel that charged $2 a night. Clara walked the length of it within an hour of leaving the station, taking stock of everything, with the careful eye her mother had called her best quality. You see what's actually there, her mother had told her once. Most people see what they expect. You see what's there. The seamstress shop was her first stop. The woman behind the counter was perhaps 50, with silver-streaked hair and the squinting expression of someone who spent a great deal of time with a needle near her face. I'm looking for work, Clara said. I've done seamstress work for 3 years in Kansas City. I do alterations, dressmaking, basic repair. The woman looked her over. I work alone. I understand. I could work by the piece if you have overflow. I don't have overflow. Clara thanked her and moved on. The hotel needed no extra help. The general store had a boy who swept and stocked. The saloon she entered and asked which required a degree of resolution she drew from somewhere deep, had a cook and wasn't looking to change that. The woman who ran the laundry on the far end of the street looked at her with something closer to interest, but the interest dissolved when Clara mentioned she had no housing and would need advance payment to cover even one night at the hotel. Can't pay in advance, the woman said, not unkindly. Not how I do it. By noon, Clara had 40 cents less than she'd started with a meal at the lunch counter that she'd eaten slowly, making it last because she didn't know when she'd eat again, and the same number of employment prospects she'd had at 10 in the morning. She sat on the steps of the general store in the sharp afternoon heat and watched the street. A man across the road caught her eye. He was older, perhaps 60, with a white beard and an unhurried way of moving that suggested he had lived long enough to stop rushing. He was loading a wagon with sacks of feed from the store's side entrance, and he paused when he noticed her sitting on the steps. You the woman came in on the morning train? He asked. There was no particular cruelty in the question. It was the directness of a man who asked what he wanted to know. Yes, sir, Clara said. He studied her for a moment. Heard what happened? Of course he had. Small towns were the same everywhere. The news traveled faster than the people. I'm looking for work, Clara said. Any kind of honest work. I'm good with livestock, with cooking, with gardening, with sewing. I learn fast and I don't complain. The man set down the sack he was holding and wiped his hands on his trousers. Name's Earl Sutton. I run the feed store. Clara Whitmore. Well, Miss Whitmore, I'll be straight with you. Ain't much here in town that'll come open for you quick, but I know a situation out past the Eastern Road that might suit. He paused. Might not either. It's not easy. I'm not looking for easy, Clara said. I'm looking for possible. Earl Sutton leaned against his wagon. Walker Ranch. About 4 miles out. Nathan Walker, he runs cattle, or he used to. Man's been struggling bad. Lost most of his hands last season, been working the place alone near 6 months. Word is, he got hurt a while back and nobody's checked on him in weeks. He paused. Nobody much goes out there anymore. Nathan Walker ain't what you'd call welcoming company. Is there a job? Clara asked. Wasn't advertising one. Earl scratched his jaw. But a place running on one man who might be hurt? Something needs doing out there. If you went out and made yourself useful, I reckon he'd pay. He's stubborn, not dishonest. Clara looked down the road that ran east out of town. She thought about $11, minus 40 cents, minus a second night at the hotel. She thought about what another day of fruitless asking in this town was likely to produce. She thought about the word possible. I appreciate it, Mr. Sutton, she said, and stood up. He looked at her. You sure like I said, Nathan Walker ain't easy. Then we might understand each other, Clara said, because neither am I. She picked up her suitcase and started walking east. Behind her in the cool of the general store, a woman named Patrice Dunmore watched through the window with her arms crossed. She's going out to Walker Ranch, she said to no one in particular. Her daughter Lydia, shelving canned goods, turned to look. Who told her about that? Earl looks like. Lydia made a soft sound of opinion. Nathan Walker won't want her out there. Nathan Walker might be past having opinions, Patrice said. Earl said he hasn't been seen in town in 3 weeks. Still, Lydia set a can on the shelf with a decisive click. A woman like that going out alone to a man's ranch. People will talk. People are already talking, Patrice said, watching the round figure growing smaller down the eastern road. She walked out of that train platform with her head up after what Douglas Hale did to her. I'll give her that much. Lydia glanced at her mother. That's hardly a qualification. No, Patrice agreed. But it's something. The 4 miles were long under the afternoon sun, and Clara stopped twice to rest her feet sitting on rocks at the side of the road with her suitcase on the ground beside her and her eyes on the horizon. She was not a woman who cried easily. She had cried at her mother's death, and she had cried once privately at 20 when a man she had allowed herself to care about had laughed at the idea of a serious attachment to a woman her size. Those were the 2 times she could recall in recent years. The humiliation on the train platform that morning had cut deep, but it had not produced tears. What it had produced was a cold, clear, exhausted determination that felt less like courage and more like the simple refusal to have come 900 miles for nothing. She was going to find something, some foothold, some beginning. She did not know yet that the beginning was 4 miles down a dirt road surrounded by scrub brush and the sound of distant cattle. Walker Ranch announced itself first through the smell cattle and hay and the particular dry mineral scent of Arizona summer, and then through the state of the fence line, which she noticed immediately because she had grown up on a farm, and fence lines told you everything. The wire was sagging in 2 places. One post was leaning at an angle that meant its footing had given. The gate across the entry road was hanging open unlatched. A ranch running properly didn't have an open gate. She walked through it up the road and knocked on the front door of the cabin. Silence. She knocked again. Hello, Mr. Walker. My name is Clara Whitmore. I came from town. Earl Sutton sent me. I'm looking for work. Silence. She tried the door. It opened. The smell hit her before her eyes adjusted the close, stale heat of a room that hadn't had its windows opened in days, and underneath it, the sharper smell of infection. She had nursed her mother through the last year of her illness. She knew that smell. Nathan Walker was on the floor beside the bed. He had apparently fallen getting up. The blanket was dragged halfway off the mattress, and his hand was still gripping a corner of it. He was a large man, broad-shouldered, and even in this condition, he had the quality of someone who had spent his life doing physical work. Dark hair, several days of beard, A face that even slack with unconsciousness held the lines of a man accustomed to trouble. He was wearing a shirt that was stuck to his left side with dried blood from a wound that had clearly been inadequately tended. Clara set down her suitcase. She crossed the room, knelt beside him, and put her fingers to the side of his neck. His pulse was there, shallow and fast, the pulse of a body fighting something, but it was there. "Mr. Walker," she said loudly and directly. "Nathan Walker. Can you hear me?" A slight movement. His brow tightened. "I need you to try to wake up," she said. "You're going to be all right, but I need you to help me get you back onto the bed." His eyes opened part way. They were blue, a pale, sharp blue that might have been striking in another circumstance. Right now, they were glassy with fever. "Who?" His voice came out as barely a scrape. "My name is Clara Whitmore. I just arrived in Red Valley. Earl Sutton told me you might need help." He looked at her for a long moment with those fever-bright eyes. "Don't need, Mr. Walker," she said calmly. "You are on the floor of your own cabin with an infected wound and a fever that's had you unconscious long enough for your fire to go completely out. I would suggest that what you need and what you believe you need may be two different things." He didn't answer that. "I'm going to help you up," she said. "Push when I pull. Can you do that?" A beat. Then something shifted in his face. Not agreement exactly, more like the acknowledgement that he didn't have another option, and he said, "Yeah." It took time. He was a large man, and his strength was at a fraction of its capacity, and Clara was not tall. But she was strong in the particular way of women who had done physical work all their lives, and she got her shoulder under his arm, and she did not let him fall. By the time he was back on the mattress, they were both breathing hard. "There," she said. He lay with his eyes half closed, his chest rising and falling too fast. "You should go," he said. "I'll go once I've dealt with that wound," she said. "Where do you keep your medical supplies?" A long pause. "Didn't say you could stay." "You didn't say I couldn't. Where are the supplies, Mr. Walker?" He closed his eyes. For a moment she thought he'd gone under again. Then, cabinet, left side of the fireplace. The wound was on his left side below the ribs. A gash from something with a jagged edge, a fence wire, or a tool that had been cleaned inadequately and had turned. It was not yet so far gone that it couldn't be managed, but it was close to the line. Clara had dealt with wounds on the farm. She had dealt with worse on her mother. She worked without flinching, and she talked while she worked because she had discovered long ago that when you talked, the person you were tending focused on your words instead of what your hands were doing. "I came out here looking for work," she said, cleaning the wound with the carbolic solution she found in the cabinet alongside some bandaging. "I answered a mail-order advertisement. The man saw me at the station and changed his mind." She applied the solution. Nathan's jaw tightened, but he made no sound. "So, I asked around town, and your name came up as someone who might need assistance on the ranch. I have experience with livestock and with cooking and with general farm work. I'm not asking for charity. I'm asking for fair wages for fair work." "You always talk this much," he said through his teeth. "When it helps, yes," she said. "Does it help?" A short sound that might have been a laugh under different circumstances. "You got a place to stay in town?" he asked. "Not yet." He was quiet while she began wrapping the wound. Then, "Barnes got a room. Used to be for the ranch hand. It's clean." "I appreciate that, Mr. Walker." "Don't thank me," he said. "I still might not want you here in the morning." "You might not," she agreed pleasantly. "We'll discuss it in the morning." She got water heating on the stove. She found cornmeal and made something that could be called porridge if you were generous in your definitions. She brought it to him with a cup of water and stood while he drank the water, all of it, because she told him to, and because even half-conscious, he apparently responded to a calm, direct voice, which she filed away as useful. He ate some of the porridge. Not much, but some. By the time she'd done what she could do for his wound, and found the hands room in the barn, and swept it out, and set her suitcase inside it, the sun was close to the horizon. She stood in the barn doorway and looked out at the ranch. The fence needed work. The vegetable patch behind the cabin had gone mostly to weeds, but the soil looked good. There were 8 cattle in the near pasture, fewer than the operation seemed built for, but 8 was something. The well pump needed the leather seal replaced, or it would start sticking. The cabin roof had a section of shingles that had lifted and would start leaking when the rain came. She could see all of it, the work of it, the shape of what this place could be if someone did the work. She had $11. She had a place to sleep. She had a man inside who had not said no. In Clara Whitmore's current mathematics, that was enough to begin. She was up before dawn. The kitchen fire was going before the sun cleared the horizon, and she was working in the vegetable garden, pulling weeds, working the soil back into shape, assessing what could still be saved when she heard the cabin door. She turned to look. Nathan Walker was standing on the small porch in yesterday's clothes, one arm braced on the doorframe, watching her with an expression she could not read. In the early morning light, he looked somewhat better than he had the day before. The sleep and the proper dressing on the wound and the water she'd made him drink had done some work, but he was still pale beneath his tan and his eyes were careful. He looked at the garden. Then he looked at her. "You're up early," he said. "I always am," she said. "How's your side? Sore?" He looked at the garden again. "That's my wife's garden." She stilled. Was she? "She's been dead 4 years," he said. It was flat, not inviting. "I'm sorry," Clara said. She meant it simply. He looked at the neat row she'd cleared. "She used to spend half the morning out there." He was quiet a moment. "Haven't touched it since." Clara waited. "Tomatoes used to grow all the way down that left row," he said. "She said the soil there was better." "It is," Clara said. "You can feel it. This half here is denser, something to do with how the water runs off the cabin roof." He looked at her. "My father had a farm in Ohio," she said. "I grew up in gardens." Something shifted slightly in his face, not warmth yet, something earlier than that, the first movement in the direction of it. "You cook?" he asked. "I do." "There's eggs," he said. "If you want to make something." "I'll make breakfast," she said. "Go back inside before you open that wound walking around on it." He looked at her for a moment, with something that might in another man at another time have been amusement. "Yes, ma'am," he said, and he went back inside. Clara made eggs and the rest of the porridge and cut the heel from a loaf of bread that had gone stiff, but not bad. She brought it to the table and sat across from Nathan Walker while they ate, and she watched him the way she had always watched people, quietly, without making a production of it, and she began to understand something about the shape of him. He was a man who had closed a door at some point. She could see it in the way he held himself, not unfriendly exactly, but removed. Like someone standing on the far side of a river, watching the bank opposite, without any particular intention of crossing. There was something in the careful blankness of his face when she mentioned the garden. Something in the way he said "my wife's garden," not with grief exactly, not after 4 years, but with the particular flatness of a man who has decided that certain things belong to the past, and the past is a country he doesn't visit anymore. She did not pry. She had not been raised to pry. She cleared the plates. She washed them. She said, "I'm going to look at your fence line today. The gate post on the western entry needs to be reset, or you'll lose that section in the next storm." He looked up from the table. "You know fence work." "My father's farm," she said. "I've set posts." He was quiet for a moment. Then, "Wires in the barn, second shelf." "Thank you." She picked up her bonnet from the peg by the door. "Miss Whitmore," he said. She looked back. He was looking at the table. His jaw was tight in the way of a man saying something that cost him something. "I appreciate what you did. Yesterday." He paused. I don't ask for help." "I know," she said. "You didn't ask. I offered." He looked up at her then, those pale blue eyes clearer this morning than yesterday, reading her face. "Why?" he said. It was a real question, not rhetorical. He genuinely wanted to know. Clara thought about it for a moment, not performing thought, but actually considering her answer. "Because I walked into this cabin and you were on the floor," she said. "And I know what it's like for there to be nobody." She picked up the bonnet. That seemed like sufficient reason. She went out to the barn to find the wire. She worked the fence line through the morning with the focus and steadiness her father had taught her, setting the post properly, packing the earth firmly, not taking shortcuts because shortcuts showed up later and always in the worst weather. Her hands knew this work. Her body knew it. There was something almost peaceful in labor that had a clear purpose and a visible result. By mid-morning, a rider came down the road toward the gate. He was perhaps 30, well-dressed for the territory, on a horse that cost more than most ranch hands made in a year. He reined up at the gate Clara had already reset, and looked at her working on the fence post 20 feet away. "Hey," he called. "This Walker's place." "It is," Clara said without stopping her work. "I'm looking for Nathan Walker." "He's inside. He's not well. If you have business, you can state it to me, and I'll let him know." The man looked at her with open evaluation. "And who are you?" "Clara Whitmore. I work here." He studied her in a way that made her think of Douglas Hale on the train platform, though this man was less careful about concealing his assessment. "Walker hired you. We have an arrangement," Clara said. The man looked amused in a way she did not like. "That's so." He looked at the cabin. "Tell him Garrison Cole came by. Tell him the offer on this property stands for another 30 days. After that—" He paused, and the pause had a quality of something being left unsaid deliberately. "After that, circumstances change." Clara drove the fence post tool down into the earth and looked at him directly. "I'll tell him." "Make sure you do," Garrison Cole said. He held her gaze for a moment too long, the kind of gaze that was a form of communication all by itself, that said you are small, and this is a large game, and you should know your place in it. And then he turned his horse and rode back down the road. Clara watched him go. She packed the soil around the post with careful, deliberate strokes. Then she went inside and told Nathan. He was at the table, looking better by another degree. Some of the color had come back, though he was still moving carefully. "Garrison Cole," he said when she'd finished. "He said the offer stands 30 days. Nathan's jaw tightened. "Been saying that for 8 months. The number keeps going up. The deadline keeps shifting." His eyes went to the window. "He wants this land." "Is there a reason he particularly wants it?" Nathan was quiet for a moment. "Water rights. The creek that runs through the back of this property is the only year-round water source in this section. Whoever controls it controls the range for 3 miles in every direction." He paused. "My wife's family settled this land. Her grandfather built the cabin." His voice remained flat, but there was something underneath it. "I'm not selling." "No?" Clara said simply. "I didn't imagine you were." He looked at her. "I'll start on the roof shingles this afternoon," she said. "The section on the west side will leak in the first hard rain." He watched her a moment. "You've seen all that already?" "I see what's there," she said. "It's useful." This time what moved across his face was unmistakable. Not warmth yet, still too early for that, but something that preceded warmth. Recognition. The particular expression of a person encountering unexpectedly someone who understands the same language they do. "I'll come help with the shingles tomorrow," he said, "if I'm steadier." "Don't rush it," Clara said. "The roof will keep another day. You won't do anyone any good if you tear that wound open." "Yes, ma'am," he said with the same flatness he'd used that morning. But this time, she was almost certain it wasn't flat all the way through. That evening, Clara sat in the doorway of the hands room in the barn while the last of the light held over the western hills, and she wrote a letter. There was no one particular to send it to. She had no family left and no close friends in Kansas City. the connections of her former life having thinned to professional acquaintance over the years of her mother's illness. But she had always written in the evening. It was how she organized her thinking. "I am in Arizona," she wrote. "Not where I expected to be, but perhaps where I was supposed to arrive. The man is difficult. He has been alone too long and he carries something heavy. But he is not unkind, and there is a quality to him, a steadiness beneath the silence, that reminds me of the best qualities of my father." She paused, looked out at the settling dark. The ranch is in poor condition, but it is not beyond saving. The land is good, the soil is good, the cattle are few, but they are healthy enough. This place was built by people who loved it, and that matters. Things built with love are harder to destroy. She put the pen down. She thought about Douglas Hale walking away down the train platform steps. She thought about Garrison Cole's deliberate gaze. She thought about Nathan Walker on his cabin floor with his hand gripping the edge of his blanket. She thought about her mother, who had told her, "Clara, the world will spend a great deal of energy deciding what you're worth. Don't let it do that work for you." The stars came out over the Arizona desert, vast and unconcerned with any of it. Clara folded her letter, set it on the small shelf beside her suitcase, and went to sleep. She had a fence that was sound. She had a wound that was healing. She had a roof that needed attention, and a garden that could be saved, and 8 cattle that needed proper tending, and a property that a man named Garrison Cole thought he could have for the right price. She had work to do, and work in Clara Whitmore's considerable experience was the surest foundation anything had ever been built on. The morning Nathan Walker walked to the barn without holding on to anything was the morning Clara Whitmore understood that he was going to be difficult in an entirely new way. For 4 days, she had watched him heal with the focused stubbornness of a man who treated his own recovery as a personal failing. The first day he had slept most of it, and she had let him. The second day he had gotten himself to the table for breakfast and stayed there through lunch. The third day he had tried to go to the pasture to check the cattle, and she had blocked the door with her body and told him flatly that the cattle were fine because she had already checked them and he was going to sit back down. He had looked at her for a long moment. Then he had sat back down. But on the 4th morning, he walked to the barn with his back straight and his stride even and no hand on the doorframe. And Clara, watching from the garden, recognized the look on his face. It was the look of a man who had decided that the period of being managed was over. She straightened up from the tomato row and wiped her hands on her apron. "How's the side?" she called. "Fine," he said without looking at her. "I'll need you to let me check the dressing this evening." He stopped, turned halfway. "Miss Whitmore?" "Mr. Walker. I'm obliged to you for what you did when I was down." He said it in the careful way of a man who had rehearsed the sentence. "I mean that. But I'm back on my feet now, and there's work that needs doing, and I'd rather we get on with it." Clara looked at him. "I've been getting on with it since the morning after I arrived. What I need from you is to let me check that wound tonight so it doesn't go septic again and put us back where we started." His jaw moved. "Fine. Thank you." She turned back to the garden. "The 3 posts on the north pasture line need resetting before the weekend. I checked them yesterday, and 2 of them have given at the base." A pause behind her. "You checked the north pasture line?" "I did. That's half a mile out." "I'm aware." Another pause longer this time. When she looked back, he was studying her with an expression she was starting to recognize, the look of a man whose picture of a situation keeps getting revised by facts he didn't anticipate. "I was going to do the north line this week," he said. "Then we'll do it together and it'll go faster," Clara said. "After I finish this row." He stood there a moment more, his hat in his hands, turning at once by the brim in the way she'd come to notice meant he was thinking through something he hadn't settled on yet. "You ride?" he asked. "I ride." He nodded once, put the hat back on, and went to saddle the horses. The north pasture fence was worse than Clara had described and better than Nathan had feared, which put them somewhere in the middle, enough work for a full morning. Not so much that the day was lost. They worked alongside each other with the efficient silence of people who knew what they were doing, and Clara noticed that Nathan Walker in motion was a different person than Nathan Walker convalescing at a table. He moved with the economy of a man who had been doing physical work his entire life. No gesture wasted, every action exactly what it needed to be, and nothing more. He also watched her work without commenting on it, which she took as a form of approval. They were on the third post, Nathan digging Clara, holding the wire taut, when he said without looking up, "What happened to your family?" She glanced at him. He was still digging, face angled down. "My father died when I was 17, she said. "Heart. My mother 7 months ago. Lung sickness." He kept digging. "Siblings. 1 brother. He went to California 10 years ago. We lost touch." She kept her grip on the wire. "You? Parents are gone. No siblings." He stopped, tested. The post depth went back to it. "My wife's family is still in Texas. We don't have much contact." Because some people need someone to blame when things go wrong," he said. It was flat, but not hard. Just a fact he'd made peace with. "I was the last person she was with. That's enough for some folks." Clara was quiet for a moment. Then, "That's not fair." "No," Nathan said. "It ain't." He set the post. She released the wire and moved to the next section. They worked in silence for a while after that, but it was a different silence than before. Not the silence of 2 strangers negotiating the terms of proximity, but the particular quiet of 2 people who have shared something true and are letting it settle. "She'd been sick a long time," Nathan said, eventually not looking at her. "Sarah. She tried not to show it, but I knew. I think I always knew it was going to go the way it went." He paused, pressing the earth firm around the post with the heel of his boot. "What I didn't know was what comes after. Nobody tells you what comes after." "No," Clara agreed quietly. "They don't." He looked up at her then. Something careful in his face, like he was checking whether he'd said too much. She didn't look away. She didn't make it a moment. She just met his eyes and then moved to the next section of fence because the work was still there and the work didn't stop for anything. After a moment, he followed. It was on the walk back to the ranch horses trailing behind them that they came over a low rise and Nathan stopped. Clara stopped beside him. Below at the edge of the property's south boundary, the boundary that ran closest to the main road, 2 men on horseback were moving along the fence line slowly. Too slowly for men with somewhere to be. They were looking at the fence, looking at the land. "Cole's men," Nathan said. His voice was quiet and very level, which Clara had already learned meant something different than a man whose voice went loud. "They're on your side of the boundary line," she said. "Yes, they are." "Can they do that?" "Not legally." He was still watching them. Whether that matters to Garrison Cole is a separate question. One of the men below pulled a notebook from his coat and began writing something down. The other one turned in a slow circle, looking at the surrounding terrain, looking at the creek that glittered at the far end of the property. Nathan's hand had closed on the fence wire beside him, without him seeming to notice he'd done it. His knuckles were white. "You should go down and tell them to leave," Clara said. "That's what they want," Nathan said. "They want me to come down there angry and say something they can use." "Then go down there calm and say something they can't." He looked at her. "You own this land," she said. "You don't have to be angry about it. You just have to be clear." He held her gaze for a moment. Then he led his horse down the rise toward the south boundary, and Clara came with him. The 2 men watched them approach without any particular hurry, which meant they'd been expected. The one with the notebook, younger, with the self-satisfied look of someone who worked for a man with money, smiled as Nathan pulled up. "Walker," he said. "Didn't expect to see you out and about." "This is my land," Nathan said. "I'm generally out and about on it. You're not supposed to be." "Just having a look," the man said. "Mr. Cole asked us to survey some of the boundary markers in the area. Make sure all the records are accurate." "The boundary markers on my property are not your concern or Garrison Cole's." "Well, that's where it gets interesting." The man tucked his notebook away with the slow ease of someone who knows they hold an advantage. "There's some question about the original deed documentation on this parcel. Mr. Cole's lawyer looked into the territory records and found some discrepancies. Might be worth you looking into before. What discrepancies? Clara said. Both men looked at her. The younger one's smile adjusted itself into something that wasn't quite condescension and wasn't quite dismissal, but was in the neighborhood of both. "Ma'am," he said with a courtesy that had nothing courteous underneath it. "This is business between Mr. Walker and Mr. Cole." "I work for Mr. Walker," Clara said. "What discrepancies?" The man looked at Nathan as if expecting him to rein her in. Nathan said nothing. He was watching Clara with an expression she couldn't see clearly from where she stood. The younger man's smile thinned. "The original survey markers on the southern and eastern lines may not align with the deed as filed. Could affect the water rights designation." "Could affect," Clara said. "Or does affect. That's a legal determination." "When was this survey conducted?" A pause. "I'm not at liberty to say." "Who conducted it?" "Miss. Which land office filed the discrepancy report?" The man's smile was entirely gone now. He looked at his partner, then back at Clara, with the recalibrated expression of someone who has just discovered that the game they're playing has more pieces on the other side of the board than they thought. "We'll be in touch with Mr. Walker through the proper channels," he said. He touched his hat brim at Nathan, not at Clara, and the two of them rode south toward the road. Clara watched them go. "Proper channels," she said. Beside her, Nathan let out a slow breath. His hand was still tight on the fence, but something in the set of his shoulders had changed. "You know about land deeds," he said. "My mother spent the last 2 years of her life fighting an insurance company over my father's death claim," Clara said. "I learned a great deal about documentation, legal filings, and the art of asking questions that people who are bluffing don't want to answer." Nathan turned to look at her fully. "They're bluffing," she said. "At least partly. If there were actual deed discrepancies on file, they'd have sent a lawyer, not 2 men with a notebook." "That's what they want me to think they might do," he said slowly. "Yes, and the hope is that you'll worry enough to sell before you verify whether there's actually anything to worry about." He was quiet for a moment. "We need to go to town." "We need to look at your deed documentation first," Clara said. "Do you have the original survey papers?" "In the cabin. Sarah's grandfather filed everything. He was careful about it." "Good. Let's go look at them before we go anywhere." The deed box was in the bottom of the chest at the foot of Nathan's bed, a flat tin box dented at one corner with a leather strap around it that had dried and cracked with age. Nathan brought it to the table and set it between them, and Clara noticed the way he handled it. Not like a document container, like something that had belonged to people he didn't have anymore. "You don't have to be here for this," he said. "I know," she said. "Open it." He opened it. The papers inside were folded with the careful deliberateness of someone who understood that these pieces of paper were the foundation of everything they'd built. Clara spread them out on the table, methodically reading each one before setting it aside. The original land grant. The subsequent deed transfer. 2 survey documents, one from the initial settlement and one from 1871. The water rights documentation, which was a separate filing and which Clara read twice. "This is clean," she said. "I know it's clean. I mean, the water rights filing is completely clean. The creek is designated specifically in this document as belonging to the Walker property, with the legal description of the boundary running from the eastern survey marker at the ridge line to the confluence point at the southern boundary." She set it down. If Cole's lawyer told him there were discrepancies in the water rights designation, either the lawyer made an error or Cole's lawyer is in on whatever this is. Nathan's jaw was tight. "Cole doesn't get lawyers who make errors." "No?" Clara said. "I didn't think so." She looked at the papers laid out between them. Then she looked at Nathan. "Who is the county land clerk?" she asked. "Man named Horace Webb. He's been clerk since before I came here." "Is he honest?" Nathan was quiet for a moment too long. That was answer enough. Then we can't use him, Clara said. Is there a territorial office above the county level? Prescott, capital, day's ride. Then that's where we go. We get a certified copy of these documents from an office where Cole has no influence before he gets the chance to muddy what's on file at the county level. She looked at him. If Webb alters the local records, it becomes your deed against whatever Cole's lawyer presents. We need an unimpeachable copy first. Nathan stared at her for a long moment. We'll go day after tomorrow, she said before he could object. One more day on that wound. In the meantime, I want to make a written list of everything in these documents, dates, filing numbers, survey coordinates, so we have a secondary record regardless. His jaw tightened. Miss Whitmore. One more day, she said firmly, and began refolding the papers. My mother taught me the best time to protect something is before it's endangered. Cole is counting on you to wait until after. Nathan put the lid on the tin box and held it for a moment, both hands flat on top. Sarah's grandfather carried this box from Texas, he said quietly. Took him 4 months to get here. He used to say the papers inside were worth more than the land they described, because without the papers, the land was just dirt. Clara looked at him. He was right, she said. Something moved through Nathan's face, a complicated thing older than grief, deeper than loss. He set the box back on the table between them. List, he said. Let's make the list. They worked at the table through the afternoon, Clara writing and Nathan providing dates and context from memory. And it was in this work, the practical, unromantic work of documentation, that something shifted between them in a way that neither of them acknowledged. It was the quality of their attention to each other. The way Nathan began to anticipate when she would need a date repeated and said it before she asked. The way Clara began to hear the difference between when he was uncertain about a detail and when he was certain and knew when to push for verification. They began to work in the rhythm of people who understood each other's thinking, and both of them felt it, and neither of them said so. It was late afternoon when Clara set her pen down and stretched her fingers. That's all of it, she said. Nathan looked at the 2 pages of dense organized notes she'd produced. You write like you've done this professionally, he said. I kept my mother's medical records for 2 years, Clara said. Every doctor visit, every treatment, every expense. When the insurance company refused to pay my father's claim, I sat across a desk from their representative with a folder 3 inches thick and walked him through every document. She paused. They paid. Nathan looked at her for a long moment. How old were you when your father died? He said. 17. I told you that. And you were fighting insurance companies at 17. Someone had to. He was quiet, turning his hat in his hands. That thinking gesture. Miss Whitmore, he said, and his voice had a quality she hadn't heard in it before, something slower, more careful. I owe you an honest conversation. She waited. When you showed up here, He stopped, tried again. I was in a bad way, not just the wound. I'd been in a bad way for some time before the wound. The ranch going the way it was going. Coal pressing on the land, losing most of the hands last fall. He looked at the table. I'd gotten to a point where I was mostly just waiting for it to finish. Clara said nothing. I don't mean... He caught her expression. Not like that. I mean, I'd stopped believing it was going to turn around. So I stopped fighting as hard as I should have. And that's how a man ends up on his cabin floor. Yes, Clara said quietly. It is. He looked up. I'm saying I'm grateful. I know I haven't shown it properly. You've shown it well enough, Clara said. You let me stay. A corner of his mouth moved. You didn't exactly give me the option of not letting you stay. No. She agreed. I didn't. This time, it was fully a smile, brief, quickly controlled but real. The first real smile she'd seen from him, and it changed his face entirely, unlocking something in it that the habitual severity had held closed. You cook? He asked. I do. There's eggs, he said, if you want to make something. Or, He pushed back from the table. I can cook. You can cook. Beans, he said. Steak when I have it. Biscuits. You can make biscuits. Functional ones. He caught her expression. Don't look so impressed. Function is all I claimed. She laughed. It came out before she could stop it. A real laugh surprised out of her, and Nathan Walker looked at her when it happened, with an expression that caught her off guard entirely. Open. Unguarded. A man who'd just heard something he'd forgotten he was missing. He turned to the stove before she could read the rest of it. Three things happened in the 2 days before the Prescott trip that Clara would later recognize as the threads that pulled together changed everything. The first was Garrison Cole himself. He rode to the ranch alone the second morning, not sending men this time, which was different and which meant something. And Clara was in the yard splitting wood when Cole's black horse came through the gate. He was perhaps 45, lean and well-dressed in the way of a man who came from money and had accumulated more, with a face that in another context might have been called handsome, and in this one was simply shrewd. He reined up and looked at the ranch with the appraising eye of a man looking at something he intends to own. Then he looked at Clara. Miss Whitmore, he said, we haven't formally met. Garrison Cole. I know who you are, Clara said. He smiled. A practiced smile, the kind that reached the corners of the mouth and not much farther. I heard you've been helping Walker get back on his feet. That's commendable. I work here, Clara said. Yes. He glanced toward the cabin. Is Nathan available? I'll get him. She didn't move right away. Mr. Cole, your men were on this property 2 days ago. I want you to know that we've reviewed the deed documentation, and we're aware of the full legal position of the water rights designation. Cole's smile held. Is that so? In detail, Clara said. Something shifted in his face so briefly she almost missed it. A recalibration. Not concern exactly. More like the adjustment of a man who has just discovered that the other side of the board has more pieces than he thought. Well, he said pleasantly, we should all be well informed. That's the civilized way to conduct business. It is, Clara agreed. Excuse me. She got Nathan, and she stood at the edge of the conversation because she had decided she was going to stand there, and there was nothing either man was going to do about it. Cole made his offer again. More money, she noted a significant increase, and Nathan said no, in the flat, certain way of a man who had said it so many times, the word had lost all uncertainty. When Cole rode away, he didn't tip his hat. She noted that too. He raised the number, she said when the gate was closed behind him. He does that, Nathan said. Every time. He's nervous, Clara said. Nathan looked at her. Not about losing the land, she said. About something specific. The price keeps going up because there's a time pressure we don't know about yet. He needs this property for a reason, and he needs it by a deadline. Nathan was quiet, looking down the road where Cole had gone. Prescott tomorrow, he said. Prescott tomorrow, she agreed. And the second thing was the town. Nathan had ridden in to get supplies, and Clara had gone with him because she was done treating Red Valley like something to be endured. She walked through town with her chin up and her eyes forward, and she let herself see everything. She saw the way conversations paused when they passed. She saw the look that moved between women on the street, that particular glance that carries a full paragraph in its half-second. She saw two men look at Nathan as they passed, then at her, then back at Nathan, with an expression that was an insult without a word spoken. She saw Nathan see it too. He said nothing. He held the store door for her and walked in behind her. Inside, Patrice Dunmore watched them come in with barely concealed interest. Nathan Walker, she said. Haven't seen you in some time. Patrice. He set his list on the counter. Patrice looked at Clara. I see you're still at the ranch, Miss Whitmore. I am, Clara said. How's that working out? The tone carried a second question underneath the first. Very well, thank you, Clara said. Patrice began pulling items from the shelves. People have been talking, she said with the directness of a woman who preferred things in the open. About the situation, at the ranch, I expect they have, Clara said pleasantly. You understand how it looks. I understand how some people have chosen to look at it, Clara said. A woman working on a ranch is not a scandal, Mrs. Dunmore. It's labor. I cook, I maintain the property, I handle the accounts. Mr. Walker pays me fairly for that work. Patrice set a tin of coffee on the counter with a sharp sound. You're not married? No. And neither is he. Also no. Clara met the woman's eyes steadily. Mrs. Dunmore, I came to this town with nothing because the man I was promised to rejected me at the train station. Mr. Walker gave me work when no one else would. What I'm not going to do is apologize for being useful. The store was quiet. 2 other women toward the back had gone very still. Patrice looked at her for a long moment. Then something moved across the woman's face, not warmth exactly, but something adjacent to respect. I'll add this to the Walker account, Patrice said, and began wrapping the items without further comment. Outside, Nathan loaded the bags into the saddlebags without speaking. When he'd finished, he stood with his back to her for a moment, one hand on the horse's neck. You didn't have to do that, he said. I know, Clara said. He turned around. His face was doing something she'd learned meant he was arriving at a conclusion he hadn't started with. For what it's worth, he said. What she said about how it looks. I haven't... He stopped. That's not... Nathan, Clara said. He looked at her. I know, she said simply. He held her gaze for a moment. Then he nodded once, put his hat on, and mounted up. The third thing happened that night. Clara had gone to the barn for the evening, sitting with her letter, the one she wrote every night to no one, when she heard Nathan's voice from outside, low and deliberate. She went still. He was on the porch, talking not to himself, but to someone who wasn't there. I don't know what I'm doing, Sarah, he said. So quiet she almost missed it. That's the truth of it. There's a woman, she's... A pause. I don't know what to do with her. Clara sat without breathing. She just does what needs doing. All of it. She sees the fence and she fixes it. She sees the wound and she tends it. She looks at this place like... Another pause. Like she sees what it could be. Clara pressed her hand flat against the barn wall. I told her about you, Nathan said. She didn't make it a moment. She just kept working. A long silence. I think you'd have liked her. God help me, I think you'd have said she was exactly what I needed. Clara sat in the dark and did not move. She sat there long after his footsteps went back inside and the cabin light went out, and she looked at the letter she'd been writing, and she did not add a single word. Some things didn't need writing down. Some things needed to be felt and held and put carefully away in the part of yourself that you kept safe. She folded the letter and lay back on the narrow cot and looked at the ceiling and thought about a man who had been alone for 4 years, talking to a woman he'd lost, and about how the shape of loneliness could look so much like strength from the outside that it was nearly impossible to tell them apart. She was still awake at midnight when she heard a sound from the pasture, not loud, not alarming exactly, but wrong. A low, irregular absence where sound should have been. She was out of the cot and pulling on her boots before she'd fully decided to move. The moon threw enough light to see by. She went to the pasture fence and counted. 7 cattle. She counted again. 7. There had been 8 that morning. She went back to the cabin and knocked. 2 sharp knocks. When Nathan didn't answer immediately, she knocked harder. Nathan? Her voice was low and clear. One of your cattle is gone. The door opened in under 30 seconds. Nathan was dressed, hat already on, which told her he hadn't been sleeping either. Which one? He said. The roan. He was past her and moving toward the barn before she finished the sentence. Could be the east fence, he said, pulling his saddle down. There was a soft spot I hadn't gotten to yet. The east side runs adjacent to the Cole property, Clara said. He stopped, looked at her. Yes, he said. It does. They rode east in the moonlight, and they found the fence, within 10 minutes, not broken through, but cut. A clean-cut wire ends curled back neatly in a way that weather and animals never produced. Nathan held the lantern over the cut without speaking. Clara crouched and looked at the ground on the other side. Horse prints, 2 sets. Cattle tracks moving east. The soil was soft enough to hold them clearly. "Tonight," she said. "These are fresh." Nathan stood with the lantern, and his jaw was tight in the way she now knew meant he was containing something large and controlled. "They took one head," he said, "to see what I'd do, or to see what you'd be able to prove," Clara said. She stood. "If you go on to coal land tonight to get that cattle back and someone sees you, you're a trespasser. It becomes your word against his." Nathan looked at the cut wire, then at her. "What do you suggest? We document this right now. I have paper in the saddlebag. We write down the date, the time, the location, the state of the fence, the tracks. Every detail." She was already moving back to her horse. "And tomorrow morning, first light, we ride to Prescott. Not just for the deed. We file a report with the Territorial Marshal's office about cattle theft and property destruction." He watched her pull the paper and pencil from the saddlebag. "You thought of all that just now," he said. "I think fast when I need to," Clara said. "Hold the lantern closer." Nathan Walker held the lantern over the cut wire in the middle of the night on the eastern edge of his property, and Clara Whitmore knelt in the dirt with paper against her knee and wrote every detail in her careful, steady hand. When she was done, she looked up at him. He was watching her with an expression she had no word for. Something beyond gratitude, older than admiration. The look of a man who has been alone in a fight for so long that the arrival of someone standing beside him hasn't fully resolved itself into something he can name. "You should know," he said quietly, "that I haven't had anyone in my corner in a very long time." The lantern threw warm light across the dark between them. "Well," Clara said, folding the paper and tucking it carefully into her pocket. "You do now." She stood, brushed the dirt from her knees, and started back toward the horses. Nathan Walker stood at his cut fence in the moonlight for one more moment. Then he followed. They rode out before the sun was fully up, the deed box wrapped in oilcloth in Nathan's saddlebag, alongside Clara's documentation and the folded paper from the night before, the one with the fence description, the track measurements, the precise time at the top. Nathan spoke about 90 minutes out. "When you were fighting the insurance company, after your father, how long did it take?" 14 months from the first denial to the final payment. "And you were 17 when it started, almost 18 by the time we finished." He looked at her across the space between the horses. "Who helped you?" "No one," she said. "My mother was sick. I found a lawyer's guide at the library. I read it 3 times. Wrote every letter myself." Nathan was quiet. Then, "Your mother raised somebody exceptional." Clara kept her eyes on the road. She did her best with what she had. "That's not what I said," Nathan said quietly. She didn't answer, but she felt it the rest of the way to Prescott. Prescott was larger than Red Valley by a considerable measure. A proper territorial capital with brick buildings and a courthouse and the particular energy of a place where decisions got made. The Territorial Land Office was on the 2nd floor of the courthouse, and the clerk behind the counter was a small, precise man of perhaps 55 who looked at their documents with the focused attention of someone who took his work seriously. Clara had brought everything: the original deed, the survey documents, the water rights filing, her handwritten inventory, and she laid them out in the order she'd established, dates and filing numbers clearly visible. "We need certified copies," she said, "of the original deed, the water rights designation, and both survey documents. And we need to verify that the records on file in this office match what I've laid out here." The clerk looked at the documents, then at Clara, then at Nathan. "You the property owner?" he said to Nathan. "I am," Nathan said. "Then I'll need your signature on the verification request." He pulled a form from a drawer. "This'll take about an hour. You're welcome to wait." "We'll wait," Clara said. They sat on a bench in the corridor, and after a minute, Nathan leaned forward with his elbows on his knees. "I've owned this ranch 9 years," he said. Never been in this building. Sarah always said you should register up here, not just the county. He paused. I kept putting it off. You're doing it now. Because of you, he said. She opened her mouth to deflect that, then didn't because it was true and they both knew it. Yes, she said simply. He turned to look at her this close in the quiet corridor. His face had none of the management it wore in public. He just looked at her. Whatever happens with the ranch, he said, with Cole, with any of it, you have a place there, not contingent on the outcome. You understand me? She sat with that and the two things underneath it. I hear you, she said. That's not the same as understanding. Nathan. She met his eyes. I hear you. He nodded and sat back. They waited in a silence that had changed its character entirely from the one they'd ridden through that morning. The certified copies came back stamped and signed, and the clerk confirmed with the careful neutrality of a man who had seen this kind of situation before, that the records in the territorial office matched the originals Clara had presented down to the water rights boundary description. The county office in Red Valley has a corresponding file, the clerk said, or it should. If you find any discrepancy between what's on file at the county level and what's here, that's a matter for the territorial marshal. We have another matter for the territorial marshal, Clara said. The clerk looked at her. She laid the folded paper from the night before on the counter, the cut fence, the tracks, the timestamps. Cattle theft and intentional property destruction documented last night. We'd like to file a report. The marshal was a broad-weathered man named Calhoun, who listened with the stillness of someone who had learned that the first version of any story was only the beginning. He asked precise questions. He read Clara's documentation twice. He looked at Nathan across his desk. Garrison Cole, he said. Yes, Nathan said. He's tried to acquire property in this county before. Calhoun was careful about it, not editorializing. Through various means. What kind of various means? Clara said. Calhoun looked at her. Legal pressure primarily. Deed challenges, survey disputes. One property owner sold under what he later described as considerable duress. We looked into it. Couldn't establish anything actionable at the time. Could you establish something actionable, Clara said, if you had documentation of a pattern? Calhoun studied her. Who are you, miss? He said, not rudely, genuinely. Clara Whitmore. I manage Walker Ranch. She came from Missouri, Nathan said. She's been with us 2 weeks. Calhoun looked between them. And in 2 weeks, she's got you in my office with certified deed copies and a documented incident report. Yes, Nathan said. Calhoun was quiet. Then he looked at Clara's documentation again, and something in his face settled into decision. I'll open a file, he said. If anything else happens, anything at all, you document it and bring it here. Don't go to the county level. Don't go to Webb. Come straight here. We understand, Clara said. And Miss Whitmore. He looked at her over the papers. Whatever you're doing out there, keep doing it. 2 hours outside Prescott, Nathan said, He's going to escalate. I know. Filing with Calhoun will get back to him. He'll know by tomorrow we were in Prescott. Good, Clara said. Nathan glanced at her. He's been operating on the assumption that you were isolated and worn down, she said. Every time we prove that wrong, we change what's possible for him. You're not afraid of him. I act like someone who decided that being afraid doesn't change the situation. She looked at him. Are you afraid of him? I'm afraid of losing the ranch, Nathan said. That's different. Yes, it is. A mile passed. When we get back, I want to talk to Earl Sutton about who else Cole has pressured over land. A pattern is harder to dismiss than a single incident. Nathan considered. Earl knows everyone. If there's something to find, he'll know. Then we start there, Clara said. Chapashaw. They got back to Red Valley at dusk, and the town had a quality Clara noticed immediately. A stillness that wasn't ordinary end-of-day quiet, but the particular stillness of a place where news has arrived and settled into the walls. She saw it on the face of the man outside the livery. She saw it in the way the woman sweeping the hotel porch stopped sweeping when they rode past. Nathan saw it too. "Something happened," he said. "Yes," Clara said. They went to the feed store first. Earl was still inside, as though waiting, which he probably had been. He listened to their day with the careful attention of a man filing information, and when they finished, he leaned back and looked at the ceiling. "Garrison Cole was in town this afternoon," Earl said. "Had a meeting with Webb at the county office. Afterward, Cole went to the saloon and talked in front of 30 people. "What did he say?" Clara said. Earl met her eyes. "He said the deed on Walker Ranch contained a fraudulent boundary description. He said the water rights had been illegally claimed in the original filing. He said the current occupants of the property were operating on a false claim and the territorial office would be reviewing the matter." The room was quiet. "He did this in public," Nathan said. "Completely level, that most dangerous level." "In the saloon with 30 people present," Earl said, "including Horace Webb." Clara thought about the timing. They had filed in Prescott that morning. Cole had moved in Red Valley by afternoon. He had moved faster than she'd expected, which meant he either had the plan already built, or he had better information about their movements than he should have. "He knew we were in Prescott," she said. Both men looked at her. "He moved today specifically because he knew what we'd done this morning. He's trying to get ahead of the certified copies. If he can establish the narrative in this town before the documentation reaches the county level, it doesn't matter what we have on paper." Earl looked at Nathan. "She's right." "I know she's right," Nathan said. He stood up. "I'm going to the saloon." "Nathan." "Not to fight," Nathan said. "To be seen. If Cole wants this public, then it's public." Clara stood up with him. Both men looked at her. "Don't," she said before either could speak. "Don't tell me to stay somewhere. That's exactly what Cole expects." Nathan looked at her for a long moment. Then he held the door. Doit. The saloon was still half full, and the silence that fell when they walked in was instantaneous and complete, the silence of a room that has been waiting for exactly this. Clara walked in beside Nathan, with her chin at the same angle she'd held on the train platform 3 weeks ago. She did not let her eyes go soft for anything. Garrison Cole was at a table near the back. He looked up when they entered, and his face did something subtle and controlled a man who had expected them and decided in advance how to play it. He stood up. "Walker," he said with the easy warmth of a man who had never been wrong. "I heard you were out of town today." "I was in Prescott," Nathan said. He didn't stop walking until he was 10 feet from Cole's table, and Clara stayed beside him. "At the Territorial Land Office, and the Marshal's office." A murmur through the room. Cole's face didn't change, but something behind his eyes recalculated. "That's so," Cole said. "The certified copies are in my saddlebag," Nathan said. "The original deed, the water rights filing both surveys. All verified against the territorial records this morning before noon." He let that settle. "Whatever you told people in here this afternoon about fraudulent boundary descriptions, I'd be careful how much further you take that." Cole looked at Clara. "Miss Whitmore," he said, "you've been busy." "We both have," Clara said. "You're a long way from whatever it is you came here to do." It was smooth, almost pleasant, but it carried the shape of where a threat would go if he decided to put one there. A woman in your situation might want to think carefully about which fights she takes on. The room was very quiet. Clara looked at him with the same directness she'd had on the train platform the day she arrived, the look of a woman who has decided she will not grant anyone the power to make her flinch. "Mr. Cole," she said, "I arrived in this town 3 weeks ago with $11. I've spent those weeks fixing fences, documenting deed records, and riding to Prescott and back." Her voice stayed even. "My situation, as you put it, is that I have considerably less to lose than you do. I'd keep that in mind." Dead quiet. Then from somewhere near the bar, a man's voice, low and dry. "She's got a point." Cole's jaw tightened, just slightly. "Nathan," he said, shifting, This conversation would be better had privately. Come by my office tomorrow and we can—" "There's nothing to discuss privately," Nathan said. "You've made this a public matter. That's fine. The territorial marshal has an open file. My deed is certified. My water rights are verified. And if one more head of cattle disappears from my property or one more fence post gets cut, I'll be in Calhoun's office by nightfall." He held Cole's gaze. "We're done here." He turned. Clara turned with him. Behind them, the silence broke into the low tide of voices, a story being told and retold the way things always were in small towns, where justice was scarcer than entertainment. Outside, Nathan kept walking until they were out of sight of the saloon windows. Then he stopped. Clara stopped beside him. He was breathing harder than the walk warranted. She recognized it, adrenaline, the aftermath of holding himself completely controlled in a room, watching for any crack to use. "You did it right," she said. "No threats, no anger, just facts. That's what holds up." He let out a slow breath. "Cole doesn't like losing the room." "No, but we've taken his primary leverage. He can't claim deed fraud against documents certified this morning." She shifted the saddlebag. "Whatever he tries next has to be something else." "That's what worries me," Nathan said. "When a man like Cole can't use the law, he finds other means." Clara thought about the cut fence, the missing cattle. "I keep trying to figure out how to repay you for this," Nathan said. "You don't." Clara, first time he'd said it without thinking. They both heard it. He didn't take it back. "You don't repay someone for standing beside them," she said. "That's not how it works." Something moved between them in the narrow blue dark of the Red Valley evening, slowly the way real things moved, like a river changing course, before you notice the water is going somewhere different. "No," he said. "I don't reckon it is." They went to find Earl Sutton. Earl listened to the saloon account with satisfaction that he kept contained, and when they finished, he reached under the counter and produced a writing tablet. "Frank Deering," he said. "He owned 200 acres east of here. Sold to Cole 14 months ago. Moved his family to Tucson." He paused. "I never thought Frank was a man who'd sell. He built that place himself. His father helped him lay the foundations. He left fast. Faster than a voluntary sale." "Do you know how to reach him?" Clara said. "I might. If he'd be willing to speak to Calhoun, even a written statement." "Frank Deering is a proud man," Earl said. "Proud men don't like admitting they were pushed around." "No," Clara agreed, "but they like seeing someone else stand up to the man who pushed them." Earl looked at her for a long moment. Then he opened the writing tablet. "I'll write tonight. Send it on the morning stage." The next morning came harder than the one before. Clara barely had the kitchen fire going when she heard horses on the road. Not one or two. Several. She went to the window. 4 riders moving at a deliberate pace, not hard, which was almost worse. They came through the gate without stopping. Nathan was beside her before she'd turned. "2 of those men work for Cole," he said. "And the other 2? Don't know them." He reached for his jacket. "Nathan," Clara said. "Let me go out first." He stared at her. "You go out angry, and if anything goes wrong, it's your word against 4 men." She held his gaze. "Let me find out what they want." A long moment. "I'll be right inside." "I know," she said, and went out. The rider in front 50s, the bearing of a man accustomed to authority, looked down at her. "Morning, miss. We're looking for Nathan Walker." "He's in the cabin. I'm his property manager. What's your business?" The man produced a folded paper. "Notice from the county land office. Survey dispute filed against the Walker property. Mr. Walker has 14 days to appear with documentation before the county review board, or the dispute proceeds." "Who filed it?" Clara said. The man paused. "Who filed the dispute?" "The filing party is Garrison A. Cole on behalf of—" "And who chairs the county review board?" Another pause. "The board is chaired by County Clerk Horace Webb. Clara looked at the paper in his hand without taking it. The man who filed the dispute is using a board chaired by a county clerk. We have reason to believe acts in his interest to review a deed we verified at the territorial level yesterday morning. She met the man's eyes. That paper is designed to look like legal process. I'll take it and give it to the territorial marshal in Prescott, who has an open file on this matter. The man held it out. She took it, folded it, put it in her apron pocket. Thank you, she said pleasantly. Good morning? The four riders exchanged glances. Then they turned and rode out. Nathan was just inside the door. He looked at her with that expression, the one of a man who keeps revising his understanding of a situation. 14-day county review, she said, handing him the paper. Cole filed yesterday. Webb chairs the board. She was already moving to the table, reaching for pen and paper. We need to write to Calhoun today, before noon. What do we tell him? That Cole filed a county review within 18 hours of our Prescott visit. That Webb chairs the board. We ask whether a county process can proceed against a deed verified at the territorial level, and what the correct venue is to contest it. Nathan sat across from her and watched her write. You know what you're doing, he said. I'm learning as I go. That makes two of us. She looked up briefly. He was watching her with the expression from last night in the yard, quieter in daylight, but present. She looked back down. What we're doing is making sure every move Cole makes gets reported above the level where his influence operates. He's accustomed to being the highest authority in a space. We're shrinking that space. What if Calhoun can't move fast enough? Then we make noise, Clara said. A lot of it, in as many places as we can. She finished and handed it to him. He took it and looked at her a moment. My wife would have liked you, he said. No drama, just a fact he'd arrived at. You said that before. Almost. I say it directly now. She didn't flinch from things, did what needed doing and didn't perform it. He looked at the letter. I spent 4 years thinking that was something rare I'd lost. Turns out I was wrong about the rare part. Clara felt something move through her chest she had no word for. Go to town, she said. Get that on the stage. At the door he turned back and looked at her the way he had in the yard last night, like a man taking careful inventory of something he'd decided mattered. I'll be back by noon. I'll have lunch ready, she said. He went. Clara sat at the table for 30 seconds. Then she stood, went to the kitchen, and started on lunch. Nathan came back faster than he'd left, and Clara saw it before he was through the door. Earl got a reply. From Deering. He got a wire this morning. Deering wants to talk. Clara went still. He's willing to speak to Calhoun. He's coming here, traveling from Tucson, here by end of the week. The weight of that settled over the room. He was waiting, Clara said. Nathan looked at her. Proud men don't go first, but they'll stand up when someone else already has. Nathan was quiet a moment. 14 days on the county review. Deering arrives by end of week. If we reach Calhoun with his statement before the deadline. Then Cole's board is reviewing a deed already inside a territorial marshal's investigation, Clara said. Webb would have to be considerably more brazen to proceed. Nathan sat down with the look of a man who has been holding something heavy and isn't sure yet whether to trust that he can set it down. When did you start thinking like a lawyer? He said. When I was 17 and somebody had to. She set a plate in front of him. He looked at it, then at her expression, unguarded, uncomplicated, just gratitude, and she had to look away. Eat, she said. 14 days of work still ahead. He ate. She sat across from him, and between them on the table were the certified copies and the marshal's letter and the county dispute notice spread like the working papers of people building something together. Which was exactly what they were. It was at supper that evening when the third twist came. Not Cole, not a rider in the yard. A knock at the door which Clara answered because Nathan was checking the cattle and the person standing on the other side was Douglas Hale. The tan suit, the watch chain, the clean-shaven face that had looked at her at the train station and said, "I see," in a way that meant something else entirely. He looked at her now with an expression she hadn't seen on the platform. Less certain. More careful. "Miss Whitmore," he said. She looked at him. "May I come in?" he said. "No," Clara said. He blinked. He'd expected differently. He'd expected the woman who had stood alone with $11. "I want to speak with you," he said, "about what happened. What happened is that you assessed me at a train station, found me wanting, and walked away without a word of explanation or apology. What is it you want to speak about?" His jaw moved. "I made an error." "You made a choice," Clara said. "An error implies it was unintentional." "Clara!" "Miss Whitmore," she said, something working in him. She could see the shape of it, a man who had decided that the woman who now ran Walker Ranch and faced down Garrison Cole in the Red Valley Saloon was a different proposition from the woman he'd walked away from. "I heard about what you've been doing," he said. "People are talking about you." "People were talking about me 3 weeks ago," Clara said. "The subject of the conversation has changed." He straightened. "I came to say I was wrong about you." "Yes," Clara said. "You were." "And to say—" He stopped, started again. "I had a full life I could have offered you. A proper home. Security. I still could." Clara looked at him. She thought about the Hans room in the barn. The tomatoes coming back along the left row. Nathan's hand around hers last night. Frank Deering coming from Tucson. 14 days of work still ahead. "Mr. Hale," she said, "you confused my willingness to begin again with desperation. I was never desperate. I was hopeful. There is a significant difference." She kept her voice even. "And I found what I was hoping for. It just wasn't where I expected." He looked past her into the cabin, beginning to understand what he was standing outside of. "You can't mean—" "Good evening, Mr. Hale," Clara said. She closed the door. She stood with her back against it and took one slow breath. Then she heard Nathan's boots on the porch steps. The door opened, and he stopped when he saw her expression. "What happened?" he said. "Douglas Hale came to revise his opinion of me," Clara said. Nathan went very still. "He's gone," she said. "I didn't invite him in." Nathan looked at the closed door, then at her. His jaw was tight in that particular way. "I didn't need his revision," Clara said. The tightness in his jaw didn't entirely release, but his eyes changed. "No," he said. "You don't." He hung his hat on the peg and came to the table, and Clara put supper in front of him, and the evening settled into its now familiar shape, two people who had chosen to be where they were eating in the lamplight, while outside the ranch breathed its nighttime sounds around them. Neither of them said much. They didn't need to. They rode back in the dark, and the silence between them was something more tired and more honest than the mornings, the silence of two people who have spent a full day doing hard things together. They came up the ranch road, and Nathan put the horses in the barn, and when he came back out, Clara was in the yard. He came to stand beside her. Not too close, but close. "Long day," he said. "Yes. I couldn't have walked in there without you." She looked at him. He was looking at the sky, not at her, and she was glad of that, because it meant she could look at his face without managing her expression. "I'm glad I came here," she said. "Not to Red Valley. Not to the ranch." She held his gaze when he turned. "Here, this, whatever this is." He looked at her for a long time. "Don't explain it," she said. "Don't name it or decide it tonight. Just let it be what it is." He was quiet. Then slowly he reached over and took her hand. Not a gesture toward anything further. Not a beginning that needed defining. Just the simple, deliberate weight of his hand around hers in the yard of a ranch that someone had tried to take and hadn't managed to under the Arizona stars. Clara Whitmore stood in the yard of Walker Ranch with Nathan Walker's hand around hers and felt for the first time since that train platform that she was exactly where she was supposed to be. She knew the fight wasn't finished. It was nowhere near finished. But she was not alone, and in Clara Whitmore's experience, that changed everything that came after. Frank Deering arrived on a Thursday 4 days before the county review deadline. Clara saw him from the garden, a man in his mid-40s on a gray horse moving with the particular caution of someone returning to a place that had cost him something. Broad through the shoulders, weathered face hands like Nathan's. When he dismounted at the gate and looked at the ranch, Clara saw what was in his eyes before she saw anything else about him. Shame. Not for doing something wrong exactly, but the specific shame of a man broken by something he believed he should have withstood. She set down her trowel and walked to the gate. "Mr. Deering," she said, "I'm Clara Whitmore. Thank you for coming." He looked at her carefully. "You're the one who stood up to Cole in the saloon." "Mr. Walker stood up to Cole," she said. "I was beside him." Frank Deering studied her for a moment, the look of a man reassessing the gap between what he was told and what he's seeing. Then he nodded once the way men of his generation settled a point they'd been arguing internally. "I'd like to speak to Nathan Walker," he said. "He's in the barn. Come inside first. I'll put coffee on." Nathan came in from the barn to find Frank Deering at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee and the expression of a man who has decided to say a hard thing and is working up the exact words for it. The two men shook hands with the brief, firm grip of people who have no shared history but recognize something in each other, and Nathan sat down across from him. Clara stayed at the stove. She was not asked to leave, and she did not offer to go. "I heard what happened here," Deering said. "The saloon, the marshal's file, the certified copies." He wrapped both hands around the coffee cup. "I should have done all of that." "You had your own situation," Nathan said. "I had a coward's situation," Deering said flatly. "Let's call it what it was." Nathan was quiet. "My wife was expecting our third child when Cole started pressing on the deed." Deering said, "I told myself I was protecting her. The truth was I was scared, and I took the first door out that I could find." He looked at the table. "I've had 14 months to sit with that in Tucson." "What did he do?" Clara said from the stove. "Cole, specifically." Deering looked at her. "Same as he's doing to you. County survey dispute. Webb running interference at the records office. But he also had men come around at night, move cattle, leave gates open. Nothing you could prove was deliberate, but you knew." And then, he paused. "Then one of his men came to me privately and said Cole was prepared to file criminal charges for deed fraud. Against me personally." The kitchen was very quiet. "Were there grounds?" Nathan said carefully. "No," Deering said. "But grounds weren't the point. The point was that he had a lawyer, and I had a fence that kept getting cut, and a pregnant wife, and I didn't have anyone in my corner who knew what to do about any of it." He looked at Nathan. "So I sold." Nathan looked at his coffee. "What he said about the criminal charges," Clara said, coming to the table. "Did he put that in writing?" "His man came in person, no paper." "But you remember exactly what was said. Word for word, I've replayed it enough times." Clara looked at him steadily. "Marshal Calhoun is in Prescott. He has an open file. What you just told us the night visits the cattle the criminal threat used as a coercive tool, if you're willing to give that as a formal statement, it closes the gap between an isolated incident and a pattern of conduct." Deering looked at her, then at Nathan, then back at her. "You think it would matter?" he said. "I think Calhoun has been waiting for someone to give him enough to act on," Clara said. "I think you might be that someone." Frank Deering set his coffee cup down. He looked at his own hands for a long moment. "My father helped me lay the foundations of that ranch," he said. "He was 62 years old, and he laid stone in July heat, because it was his son's land." A pause. "I sold it for fear, and I've been ashamed of that every day since." "Then don't be ashamed of it anymore," Clara said quietly. "Do something about it." Deering looked at her with the expression of a man who has just been handed something he thought he'd lost his right to. "When can we ride to Prescott?" he said. They rode the next morning, Nathan, Clara, and Frank Deering, and the road felt different from the first time. Less uncertain, more purposeful. They rode without much conversation, and when Prescott came into view, Deering straightened in his saddle in a way that Clara thought meant something important. Calhoun received them in the same office at the same desk, and he listened to Frank Deering's account with the same focused stillness he'd brought to theirs. But something in the marshal's face changed as Deering talked a controlled shift, the kind that happened when the pieces of something unresolved for a long time began locking into position. When Deering finished, Calhoun was quiet for nearly a full minute. Then, the criminal threat. He made that through an intermediary. His man came to my property, Deering said, alone. Told me Cole would file charges if I didn't sell within 30 days. Name of the man, Reston, Roy Reston. He's still working for Cole. I saw him when I rode through Red Valley yesterday. Calhoun wrote that down. His face had gone to its most neutral, which Clara had already learned meant it was most active underneath. Mr. Deering, Calhoun said, I'm going to ask you to put everything you've told me in a signed written statement. Can you do that today? That's why I came, Deering said. Calhoun looked at Nathan, then at Clara. I'm going to be direct, he said. What Deering's statement gives me combined with what you've already filed is enough to open a formal investigation into Cole's land acquisition practices. That's different from the incident file we opened before. He paused. A formal investigation means Cole gets notified. It also means he can no longer file county actions against the Walker property while the investigation is open without it looking like exactly what it is. Clara leaned forward slightly. How long does notification take? I'll send a rider today. Cole will know by tomorrow morning. She thought about that. The county review deadline is in 10 days. Yes, Calhoun said. And Webb will know that filing against Walker, while Cole is under formal territorial investigation, would put Webb himself in a very difficult position. A very precise pause. Webb is many things. Stupid is not one of them. Nathan sat back in his chair. Clara looked at him. She watched him absorb it, the full shape of what had been threatening this place, and what it meant that the threat was collapsing. She watched the tension that had lived in him since before she arrived begin to release slowly in the measured way of a man who had learned not to trust sudden relief. He looked up at her. She held his gaze and didn't say anything because there was nothing to say that the moment wasn't already saying. Halfway back, Deering pulled his horse alongside Clara's. How long have you been at Walker Ranch? 26 days. He was quiet. Earl told me why you came to Red Valley. What happened at the station? It was a sorry thing, Clara said simply. You don't look like someone it happened to, Deering said. The blunt honesty of a man who doesn't decorate true things. You look like someone it happened to, and it didn't take. I had no intention of letting it, Clara said. He nodded. No, I reckon you didn't. He rode ahead to join Nathan, and Clara held her own pace for a moment and let herself feel the full weight of 26 days, $11 a train platform, a cabin floor, a garden, a deed box, a voice on a dark porch saying, I think you'd have said she was exactly what I needed. 26 days was not a long time. It was also in Clara Whitmore's experience more than long enough. They rode into Red Valley at late afternoon, and the town felt different, not the watchful stillness of a place absorbing news, but something more active. People who held their glance. The woman at the hotel steps who nodded just barely when Clara passed. Something had shifted while they'd been gone. Earl Sutton was outside his store, and he came off his step when he saw them. How'd it go? He said. Formal investigation, Nathan said. Calhoun sends notification today. Earl let out a slow breath. Good. That's good. He looked between them. Because you need to know something before you hear it another way. He paused. Douglas Hale was in the saloon last night. Clara went still. He talked, Earl said carefully. About you, Miss Whitmore. About why you came to Red Valley. What happened at the station. He was... Earl's jaw tightened. He was trying to be funny about it. Nathan's horse moved, because Nathan's leg had tightened against the animal's side without him fully deciding to. "Who heard it?" Clara said. "Half the town," Earl said. Clara looked at Earl, then at Nathan, who was not looking at her, but whose jaw had gone to its most controlled position. "Nathan," she said low. "I'm fine," he said. He was not entirely fine. "It doesn't change anything," she said. "I know that." He turned to look at her, and what was in his face was not pity. She would have known what to do with pity, but something considerably more complicated. Something that had been arriving for 26 days and had finally gotten there. "That's not what I'm thinking about." "What are you thinking about?" "What I'd like to say to Douglas Hale." "Don't," Clara said. "Clara, I mean it. He's not worth the trouble it would make, and I don't need it." She held his gaze. "I don't need defending from Douglas Hale. I left him on the wrong side of a closed door. That's enough." Nathan held her gaze for a long moment, something working through him. Then, "All right," he said. "All right," she said. Earl Sutton had been watching this exchange with the careful attention of a man who understands he is witnessing something that is not really about Douglas Hale at all. He said nothing. He was wise enough for that. The confrontation with Hale came anyway, not because Nathan sought it, but because Red Valley was a small town, and small towns had a way of putting people in the same space whether anyone had chosen it. It happened at the general store the following morning. Clara was at the counter when she heard Douglas Hale's voice behind her, easy, social, comfortable in a room. She kept her back to the door. She placed her order with Patrice Dunmore and did not turn around. She heard him stop behind her. "Miss Whitmore," he said. She turned. She had never been a woman who let people address her back. She looked at him with the same direct, even look she'd given him at the station and at the cabin door. "Mr. Hale," she said. The store had the quality of a held breath. "I owe you an apology," he said, at full volume. Courage or calculation, she wasn't certain which. "For what I said in the saloon. That was wrong of me." "I accept your apology," she said. He looked somewhat surprised she'd said it that cleanly. "I also want you to know," he said, "that what I've seen of you since you arrived—" "Mr. Hale," Clara said, not unkindly, "I appreciate the apology, and I mean it when I accept it, but I'm not interested in your revised assessment of me." She held his gaze. "I have a good life here. I don't need anything from you." She turned back to the counter. Patrice Dunmore was looking at her with an expression that had traveled a considerable distance from the first day Clara had stood in this store. "I'll add this to the Walker account," Patrice said. Then very quietly, just for Clara, "Good." Clara nodded once. She gathered her supplies and she left. On the 9th day, one day before the county review deadline, Horace Webb closed the dispute file. Earl brought the news to the ranch in person. He pulled up to the gate at mid-morning, with satisfaction on his face, tempered by the wariness of a man who knows that one closed door doesn't mean the road is clear. Webb withdrew the review filing, Earl said. "Word is Cole told him to drop it." Nathan stood in the yard and heard that and was quiet. "Why?" Clara said. "Calhoun's notification arrived 2 days ago. Formal territorial investigation tends to focus a man's attention on what's provable and what ain't." "Does Cole know about Deering's statement?" Clara said. "By now, yes. And he knows that once Deering talked, other people start remembering things they'd rather not remember publicly." Earl paused. "There's a man named Alvarez on the South Road who sold 18 months ago, and the Corrigan widow who sold last spring. Both left quickly. Both were quiet about why." Nathan looked at Clara. "Cole's not done," Clara said. "No," Earl agreed. "But he's changed what he can do next. Every day that investigation stays open is a day your property stays yours." He looked at Clara. "You've bought time. What you do with it is up to you." He drove back down the road, but the story wasn't finished. Clara had known that since Calhoun's words, a formal investigation doesn't mean the land is safe, only that the process is slower. She had filed that away and not forgotten it. Cole's next move came 3 days later, and it didn't come through lawyers or county offices or men with notebooks. It came through the bank. A letter arrived from a Mr. Harlan Pierce, Vice President, Territorial Savings and Trust, stating that the Walker Ranch property loan, a 5-year note taken out in 1880, had been reviewed, and the bank was exercising its right to call the note. Full repayment. Within 30 days. Nathan read it twice. Then he set it on the table without a word. Clara picked it up. How much? $460. Do you have it? No. She set the letter down. Who owns Territorial Savings and Trust? He looked at her. I've banked there 6 years. Harlan Pierce has been vice president the whole time. I don't know who owns it. She looked at the letterhead. Prescott address. A man with money and patience and a lawyer who didn't make errors, even if Cole has an interest in the bank. Nathan said, calling a legitimate loan is legal. Calling a legitimate loan 9 days after a territorial investigation opens against you is a pattern, Clara said. It's also the kind of thing a judge examines when determining whether financial coercion is being used to accomplish what legal process couldn't. Nathan stared at her. We need Calhoun, she said. Today. He was already reaching for his hat. They rode to Prescott for the 3rd time, and Calhoun looked at the letter for a long time without speaking. Harlan Pierce. You know him, Nathan said. 8 years in Prescott, solid reputation, conservative lender. He set the letter down. Garrison Cole sits on the bank's advisory board. Is calling a loan legal? Clara said. Under most note agreements, yes. Missed payments or changed risk assessment. Nathan hasn't missed a payment in 6 years. Calhoun was quiet. Then the changed risk assessment is their justification. The question is what changed it. He looked at the letter. Timing is suggestive, not proof. What if Pierce had done this before? Clara said. Called loans on properties Cole subsequently acquired. What if Deering's property had a loan at Territorial Savings, the Corrigan widow Alvarez? Calhoun's eyes sharpened. That would be a pattern, he said slowly. That would be evidence, Clara said. Calhoun was quiet. Then he picked up a pen. I'll make some inquiries. 3 or 4 days. In the meantime, don't make any payment or acknowledgement on that note. Don't respond to the letter. If Pierce contacts you, tell him your legal representative is handling it. I don't have a legal representative, Nathan said. You do now. Territorial Marshal's office has standing counsel. I'll have him contact you. Calhoun set the pen down. Cole's made a mistake. He's moved too fast on too many fronts and left tracks. He looked at Clara. She been this way the whole time, he said to Nathan. Yes, Nathan said. Not quite pride in his voice, something that ran deeper than pride. The bedrock of it. I thought so, Calhoun said, and went back to his notes. 4 days later, Calhoun sent a rider. The rider arrived at mid-afternoon while Clara was working the accounts, and Nathan was out with the 2 new hands, the brothers from New Mexico, solid and capable, who had started 3 days ago checking the expanded cattle line. Clara read the message. Read it twice. Then she went to the pasture fence and called Nathan's name. He heard her and came at a trot, which told her he'd read her voice correctly. She handed him the message. Calhoun had found this pattern. Not just Deering 2 other properties, both acquired by Cole in the past 3 years, both with loans at Territorial Savings and Trust, called in the weeks following county survey disputes. The Corrigan widow. A man named Harston, who'd sold and moved to California. 3 properties. 3 called loans. 3 sellers who had left fast and quietly. And a formal connection between Cole and Pierce that Calhoun's inquiry surfaced in the bank's own public filings. Not an advisory board seat, but a 5-year-old partnership agreement on record at the Territorial Commerce Office that Pierce had apparently assumed no one would ever cross-reference against a land dispute 2 hours from Prescott. Nathan read to the bottom of the message. He read it again. Then he looked at Clara. She looked back at him. "It's over," she said quietly. "Not yet," he said. "But close." "Close enough," she said. He stood with the message in his hand and absorbed it, the full weight of what had been threatening this place, and what it meant that the threat was collapsing. She watched the tension that had lived in him since before she arrived begin to release in the measured way of a man who had learned not to trust sudden relief. He looked up. "We should ride to Prescott," he said. "Tomorrow," she said. "Tonight, let's eat supper like people who don't have a crisis to manage." That smile, still relatively new, still a little surprised at itself. "Yes, ma'am," he said. He put the message in his shirt pocket and turned back to finish what he'd started, because that was the thing about Nathan Walker that Clara had understood from the second day she'd known him. He finished what he started. She walked back to the cabin. She showed him the numbers, that evening, columns of income against projected costs, the cattle expansion plan, the timeline to profitability. She walked him through it the same way she'd walked the insurance company through her father's death claim, methodically, without apology, with the certainty of someone who'd checked the arithmetic 3 times. Nathan followed every line. He asked 2 good questions. He caught one thing she'd missed: the cost of winter feed if they expanded before first frost, and she said, "You're right, add it here," and adjusted the column without the slightest indication that being corrected bothered her. "This is good," he said. "I know," she said. He looked at her. "I mean, genuinely good work. I know." He heard the difference, not arrogance, just the steady self-knowledge of a woman who had been told her whole life that her body defined her worth and had quietly, persistently refused to believe it. "2 hands," he said. "You have someone in mind." Earl mentioned 2 brothers from New Mexico. He vouches for both. "I'll talk to Earl tomorrow." He was quiet. Lamplight between them. The accounts spread across the table. The sounds of the ranch settling into night. "Clara," he said. She looked up. "I want to say something, and I want to say it directly." He looked at his hands, then at her. "I was a man who had stopped believing things could be different. I thought I'd used up whatever portion of good fortune a person gets, and the rest was just managing what was left." He paused. "You walked into this cabin 27 days ago, and you didn't accept that. You just started fixing things." Clara was quiet. "I'm not talking about the ranch," he said. "I know," she said. He held her gaze. "I don't have a clean way to say this. I've been trying to find one, and I don't think it exists." He reached across the table and set his hand over hers, deliberate, the way everything he did was deliberate. "I'm glad you came. I'm glad you stayed. And whatever happens next with Cole, with the ranch, with any of it, I want you to know that I've stopped thinking about what this place could be without you in it." Clara looked at his hand over hers, then at his face. She thought about Douglas Hale's "I see." She thought about $11. She thought about the letter she'd been writing every night to no one, and the night she'd sat in the barn and heard Nathan's voice on the porch and hadn't been able to write a single word after. "I'm not going anywhere," she said, not as reassurance, as a statement of fact. His hand tightened slightly over hers. "I'd like to court you properly," he said, "if you're willing." Clara Whitmore looked at Nathan Walker across the kitchen table of the ranch she'd spent 27 days helping to save, and she felt something settle in her chest that had been unsettled since before she could remember, something she hadn't known was restless until it stopped. "I'm willing," she said. The lamp burned between them. Outside, the ranch breathed and the cattle shifted, and the Arizona night did what it always did, vast and unhurried and entirely unconcerned with the small, enormous things happening in a lit kitchen on its surface. Nathan Walker smiled fully, unguardedly, and it changed his face completely, the way first light changes a landscape that looked one way in the dark and entirely different when you could finally see it properly. Clara smiled back, and between them on the table, spread across the accounts she'd done, and the plans they were making, was the evidence of the only kind of story that had ever mattered. Not the story of people waiting to be rescued, but of people who had each extended a hand in the dark and found the other person already reaching. She stood at the porch step and looked at all of it. The sound fence, the smoke from the bunkhouse, the tomatoes heavy on the left row where the soil was better, the pump that hadn't stuck in 2 weeks. She thought about the woman who had stepped off that train 29 days ago. That woman was still here, just standing somewhere different. She went inside and started supper. The letter from Calhoun arrived on a Monday morning, and it was not the letter Clara had been expecting. She had expected notification of a hearing date, the formal territorial process, the orderly legal machinery grinding toward resolution. She had been preparing for that. Her documentation was organized. Deering's statement copied twice the timeline of incidents laid out in her clear sequential hand. What she got was a single paragraph saying Garrison Cole had retained legal counsel in Prescott and was contesting the scope of the investigation on procedural grounds. The investigation was not closed, but it was paused pending a jurisdictional review by the territorial court. That review could take anywhere from 3 weeks to 3 months. 3 months. Clara read the letter at the kitchen table and set it down and looked at the window. Nathan came in from the barn and read her face before he read the letter. "What happened?" he said. She handed it to him. He read it. His jaw tightened in that particular way. Then he set it on the table between them. 3 months, he said. At most, possibly less. And the bank note, still due in 22 days. She had been calculating since the first line. Calhoun's counsel may be able to argue the note call is part of the pattern under investigation and seek a stay. But that's not guaranteed. Nathan was quiet. $460. Yes. He looked at the letter, then at her. I have about 140 in the ranch account. After the hand's wages last week. Clara looked at the table. She thought about what she had 3 years of seamstress wages, most of which had gone to the train ticket and her mother's last medical bills. She had kept a careful reserve, a habit of a woman who knew what it was to have nothing. She had not spent it since arriving in Red Valley because she had not needed to, and because she was not a woman who spent money she might need later. I have $63, she said. Nathan looked at her. That's 203, she said. We're still short, 257. Clara, I know it's my money, she said. I know it was mine before I came here, and I know what you're about to say. She looked at him steadily. Don't. He held her gaze. This ranch is worth fighting for, she said. I've been fighting for it for a month. This isn't a different kind of fighting, it's just a different currency. Nathan was quiet for a long time. She could see the full complexity of what it cost a man like him, someone who had built his sense of himself around being capable and self-sufficient, to sit across a table from a woman and listen to her say, I'll carry part of this. We're still short $257, he said finally. Yes, she said. Any ideas? Several, Clara said. Let's start with Earl. Earl Sutton listened at his counter with the focused attention of a man who understands that the financial health of people around him is connected to his own. I can put in 50, he said. No preamble, just 50. Don't look at me like that, he said before either of them could speak. This ain't charity. This is me investing in the fact that Cole owning the water rights on that creek would double my feed costs within 2 years. He reached for his ledger. 50. What else do you need? 197 more, Clara said. Earl thought. Frank Deering. Nathan shook his head. I can't ask Deering for money. He came all the way from Tucson to give a statement. That's already more than... Deering didn't lose his land because he ran out of money, Earl said. He lost it because he ran out of fight. He's been in Tucson 14 months wanting a second chance at it. You're not asking him for charity. You're giving him a stake in the outcome. He looked at Nathan. Let me write to him. Nathan looked at Clara. She looked back. Write to him, Nathan said. Earl pulled out his writing paper. Anyone else? Clara had been thinking. Patrice Dunmore, Both men looked at her. "She's been watching this since I arrived," Clara said. "She's been watching Cole operate in this town for years, and she's not happy about it. She's also the primary information center of Red Valley, which means if she's in half the town, knows within 24 hours. Earl looked at her with equal parts appreciation and wariness. "That's a particular kind of strategy." "Yes," Clara said. "It is." Earl put on his coat. "I'll go see Patrice myself." Patrice Dunmore listened to Earl with her arms crossed and her expression giving nothing away. Clara, watching from the doorway, recognized the face of a woman doing rapid internal calculation. When Earl finished, Patrice looked past him at Clara. "How much short?" she said. 147 after Earl's contribution. "I can do 40. Patrice unfolded her arms. "I won't say I'm doing it for you, Miss Whitmore. I'll say I'm doing it because Douglas Hale stood in my saloon and laughed, and I've watched Garrison Cole do as he pleases in this town for the better part of 5 years, and I've had enough of both of them." She paused. "But also, yes, I respect what you've done here, and I'll say that plainly." Clara looked at her for a moment. "Thank you, Patrice," she said, simply, without ceremony. Patrice nodded once. 107, she said. "Keep working." The rest came from 3 places Clara hadn't planned on. Marcus Bell, the livery owner, came to the feed store that afternoon. Word had gotten around, which was exactly what Clara had intended when she'd mentioned Patrice Dunmore, and put $30 on Earl's counter. "Cole tried to buy my livery 2 years back," he said. "I didn't like how he went about it. 2 ranch hands from east of town. The Mercer brothers scraped together $35 between them because, as the elder one put it, that woman stood up in that saloon and said what needed saying." And Frank Deering did not wait for Earl's letter. He'd heard through his own channels and sent a wire to the Red Valley Telegraph that read, "Put me down for 50. Don't argue. Deering." Nathan read the wire in the feed store, with all of them gathered around Earl's counter, and he didn't say anything for a long moment. Earl counted it out properly. $472. 12 over what the bank had demanded. Nathan looked at the money, then at Clara, then at the assembled faces: Earl, Patrice, Marcus Bell, the Mercer brothers. Deering's wire propped against the cash box. "I don't know what to say," he said. It came out rough and he didn't try to smooth it. "You don't have to say anything," Earl said. "Just keep the ranch." Nathan cleared his throat. He looked at his hat in his hands. "I'll pay every one of you back, with interest. That's not a question." "We know," Earl said. "Now let's get this to the bank before Pierce comes up with another reason." Honked. They rode to Prescott the following morning, Nathan and Clara with Calhoun's standing counsel Aldridge, who had already drafted a formal objection to the loan call based on the active investigation. The combination of full repayment and the documented objection put Harlan Pierce in the position of having received his money and simultaneously being named in a territorial legal brief as a party to a pattern of financial coercion. Pierce met them in his office with the expression of a man who has just understood that the walls around him have shifted considerably since the last time he looked. He accepted the payment. He signed the release. He did not make eye contact with Clara, which she noted. Outside, Aldridge tucked the signed release into his case. "That's the loan resolved. The investigation continues." He looked at Clara. "I've been in this work 8 years. I've never seen a civilian build a case file this well." "I've had practice," Clara said. Aldridge looked at Nathan. "Marry this woman." "Don't give him instructions," Clara said. "He's perfectly capable of arriving at his own decisions." Aldridge was still laughing when he walked back to his office. Nathan looked at her on the Prescott street with the whole weight of 33 days sitting in the air between them. "He's not wrong," he said. "No," she said. "He's not." Nathan reached into his coat pocket. She had noticed him touch that pocket twice in the past 2 days, and hadn't asked, and brought out a small ring. Plain silver single stone. "This was Sarah's grandmother's," he said. "Sarah wore it on her right hand. She told me once that whoever came after her, she hoped she'd be someone who deserved it." He held it between them. I think she'd say you do. Ask me properly, Clara said. He took her hand. Clara Whitmore, will you marry me? Yes, she said. Immediate the way she said everything that was simply true. He put the ring on her finger. They stood on a Prescott street in the afternoon light, and neither of them spoke, because there was nothing to say that wasn't already being said. Then Clara looked at the ring and said, Now let's go home. We have a ranch to run. Nathan Walker laughed real and full and unguarded, and they walked back to the horses. But before any of that, before the wedding, before October, there was a Tuesday morning that Clara would remember most clearly of all. Nathan had ridden to town for supplies. She was at the kitchen table working accounts when she heard something wrong. She went to the door. One of Cole's men was at the south fence, standing at the point where the fence met the creek marker, with something in his hand looking at the post. She walked out. Step away from that marker, she said. He turned. Young, 25 at most. The look of someone doing a job without thinking too much about it. Ma'am, I know what you're doing, Clara said. You're marking the position before you move it. If you touch that post, I'll have you in front of the territorial marshal by nightfall. Not the county office. The marshal, who has an open investigation with your employer's name on it. He looked at the marker, then at her. I'm just looking. Then you've looked? Clara said. Good morning. He stood another moment, the calculation of whether the job was worth the complication, and then turned and walked back to the road. Clara went inside and added it to her incident log. Date, time, location, description. She would send it to Calhoun on the afternoon stage. Then she sat back down at the accounts. The morning kept going. That was what she had understood. The morning kept going. You documented the incident, sent it on the stage, sat back down, and kept working. You did not wait for the crisis to resolve before living. The living was the resolution. The only thing that could actually take this place from them was for them to stop. She had not stopped on the train platform. She had not stopped in a strange town with $11. She had not stopped at a cabin door with a man on the floor. She was not going to stop now. Nathan came back from town, and she told him about the man at the south fence marker. He stood in the kitchen doorway and looked at her. You handled it, he said. It needed handling, she said. Are you hungry? He came inside and sat down, and she put lunch in front of him, and he watched her. The way she had learned meant he was storing something in a place he intended to keep. Clara, he said. I spent 4 years thinking being alone was the cost of being strong, he said. That needing help meant something was wrong with you. She sat down across from him. My father was like that. Couldn't ask for anything. It killed him in the end, not directly, but the way it made him refuse to rest when he should have rested. Nathan was quiet. The strongest thing I've ever seen, Clara said, was Frank Deering riding back to Prescott to give a statement that cost him his pride. Not because he wasn't scared. He was. He did it anyway. She looked at Nathan. That's the only real courage there is. The kind you do while you're still afraid. Is that what you did? He said. On the train platform. Yes, she said. I was terrified. I had $11 and a strange town and nowhere to go. She paused. But I was not going to let Douglas Hale be the last word on what I was worth. Nathan held her gaze for a long moment. He doesn't get to be the last word, he said. On anything. No, Clara agreed. He doesn't. She picked up her fork. Eat your lunch. He picked up his fork. Yes, ma'am, he said for what she thought might be the 100th time, and this time it was warm all the way through. The territorial investigation concluded 7 weeks later. Not with a dramatic public trial, the law moved more slowly than stories did, and Clara had understood that from the beginning. But it concluded with a finding that Cole's land acquisition practices constituted a pattern of fraudulent coercion, that Webb had altered county records on 2 separate occasions, and that he had been acting in Cole's interest in his official capacity. Webb resigned 2 days before the finding was made public. Cole's lawyer negotiated a settlement relinquishment of disputed water rights in exchange for the territorial court not pursuing criminal fraud charges. Harlan Pierce retired from the bank. None of it happened quickly. All of it happened because Clara Whitmore had walked into Cole's men at a fence line one morning and asked the right questions in the right order. Frank Deering got his money back, not the land but the purchase price, plus a court-assessed penalty. He wrote from Tucson that his wife had said to thank Miss Whitmore specifically because Frank had come home a different man than the one who had left. Nathan read that letter at the kitchen table. Clara listened. Neither of them commented on it. Some things didn't need commenting on. The morning of the wedding was an ordinary working morning, until it wasn't. Clara was in the garden at 6. The tomatoes needed staking on the left row, heavy with the season's last fruit, when Nathan came out of the cabin in his good shirt. The one from the cedar chest. The one that still smelled faintly of something older. He stood at the porch step and looked at her. "You're in the garden on our wedding morning," he said. "The tomatoes won't stake themselves," Clara said. Clara. She looked up at him. He had shaved carefully. His hair was combed. He was holding his hat in both hands and looking at her in the garden with dirt on her hands, and the early Arizona light coming across the ranch, and his face had the expression she had first seen fully on the Prescott Street, the one she still didn't have a word for and had stopped trying to name. "Come inside," he said. "Please." She drove the last stake into the earth, stood, and went inside. Her dress was on the chair by the window. Patrice Dunmore had helped her alter it 2 weeks ago, and it fit properly, and it was a deep blue that her mother had once said was the color that made Clara's eyes look exactly like what they were. She put it on. She looked at herself in the small mirror on the wall. She thought about a woman on a train platform with $11 and a folded letter. She thought about what it felt like when someone looked at you and found you wanting, and about how you carried that, and what you did with it, and how long it took to understand that their assessment had nothing to do with your actual worth. She thought about her mother. "I wish you could see this." And then she went out to marry Nathan Walker. Peace out. The ceremony was in the Red Valley Church, which was not large but was full, not in the way of a society event, but in the way of a community that had watched something happen and decided they wanted to be present for the end of it. Earl Sutton sat in the front pew. Patrice Dunmore was there with Lydia. Marcus Bell. The Mercer brothers in their good shirts. Frank Deering had come back from Tucson with his wife, a small woman with kind eyes, who gripped his hand when Clara walked in, and whose expression made Clara understand what these weeks had meant to the Deering family from the outside. Calhoun was at the back. The territorial marshal who had ridden from Prescott on his own time stood with his hat in his hand and nodded once when Clara caught his eye. She walked down the aisle with no one to give her away, because there was no one left, and because she didn't need giving. She walked herself. Nathan stood at the front in his good shirt. When he saw her come through the door, his face did something she would remember the rest of her life. Not surprise, but the particular expression of a man for whom the thing he expected and the thing he felt when it arrived turned out to be two entirely different magnitudes. He reached out his hand. She took it. The minister was brief, which she appreciated. They said their words she clearly without hesitation. Nathan, in the low, deliberate voice she'd learned, was how he said things that mattered. And Nathan Walker kissed his wife in the Red Valley Church with every person who had spent the past month doubting, revising, and finally understanding, watching from the pews. Patrice Dunmore pressed her handkerchief to her eyes, which she would have denied if asked. Earl Sutton smiled the smile of a man who had made a $50 investment and was feeling very good about the return. Calhoun put on his hat and slipped out quietly because he was not a man who lingered at celebrations, but he had wanted to see it, and he had. Gee. Outside the church in the full morning light, Douglas Hale appeared at the edge of the crowd. Clara saw him before Nathan did. He wasn't quite part of the gathering, standing just outside it, with the expression of a man who has arrived somewhere he isn't sure he belongs, but has come anyway. He caught her eye. She held his gaze for a moment. He nodded. A small, real nod. No performance. Not apology again, not revision. Something simpler than either acknowledgement. She nodded back. Nathan's hand was at the small of her back, and she felt him notice the exchange and the slight tension in his hand, and she pressed her hand briefly over his to say, "It's all right," without words. His hand relaxed. Douglas Hale turned and walked away. Clara watched him go and felt nothing that hurt. What she felt was the cleanness of a thing that was finished, not forgiven or forgotten exactly, but set down, moved past. She turned back to her husband. "Ready," Nathan said. "Yes," she said. "Let's go home." Clara stood on the porch of Walker Ranch, her ranch now, in the way that mattered, and watched the afternoon light move across the land. October had changed it. The garden turned over for winter. 14 head of cattle in the pasture. The fence sound along every boundary. The shingles on the west side hadn't leaked once in September's rains. Nathan came up behind her and stood close. "What are you thinking?" he said. "I'm thinking about the woman on the train platform," she said. "With $11. "What about her?" "She was afraid," Clara said. "She didn't act it, but she was." "I know," Nathan said. She looked at him. "How?" "Because I watched her walk into my cabin 3 minutes after the worst morning of her life and take charge of a situation she had no reason to take charge of." He paused. "That's not certainty. That's what you do when you're scared, and you do it anyway." Clara looked at him. "You were afraid too," she said. "Still am," he said. "Different things now." She turned back to look at the ranch. At the fence line and the cattle and the garden turned under and the sound roof and the smoke from the bunkhouse. At the land that someone had tried to take, and that was still theirs. "Nathan," she said. I didn't come here for this." She meant the ranch, the land, the fight, all of it. "I came because a man promised me something and didn't mean it. I came because I had $11 and nowhere else to go." "I know," he said. "But I would come again," she said. "Knowing everything. I would step off that train and walk 4 miles in the July heat and knock on that door again." She looked at him. "I want you to know that." Nathan Walker stood on the porch of his ranch and looked at his wife and felt, as he had been feeling for weeks, in accumulating degrees, that he had been given something he had stopped believing was possible. Not just the practical rescue of the land or the resolution of the legal threat, but the thing underneath all of it, the thing that made the land worth saving, someone to stand beside. He had been standing beside himself for 4 years. He had forgotten how different it was to have someone there. "Clara," he said. She looked at him. "You came for $11 and a door that closed," he said. "And you ended up building something. Here. With me." He looked back at her. "I want you to know that I understand what that is, what it costs, and I'm not going to forget it." Clara looked at him for a long moment. "You weren't easy," she said. "No," he agreed. "The ranch wasn't easy." "No." "Coal wasn't easy." "No." She looked at him. "Nothing worth having ever is." He reached over and took her hand, the same gesture as that first night in the yard in the dark, before they had words for what was starting. The same deliberate weight of his hand over hers. Only now they were on the porch of their ranch in October light, with cattle in the pasture and hands in the bunkhouse and a signed marriage certificate in the deed box alongside Sarah's grandfather's papers, and the future was something they were building together. "Thank you for knocking on that door," Nathan said. Clara looked out at the land that was theirs. "Thank you for being on the other side of it," she said. There was an evening Clara thought of as the real end and the real beginning simultaneously. She was in the kitchen late after Nathan had gone to bed, writing her letter, the one she wrote every night to no one. She sat with the pen over the paper and realized she didn't know how to begin it because the voice she'd been writing to the imagined recipient, the placeholder for connection, had been replaced. Not eliminated, replaced. She wrote to someone now, the actual life she was living. She sat for a while. Then she wrote, "I am in Arizona. This is my home now, not accepted by default, but chosen. Every morning, the way you choose to get up and start the fire. I married a man who talked to his dead wife on the porch because he had no one living to talk to. I understand that now as the saddest and most honest thing I have ever heard. He doesn't have to do that anymore. I arrived with $11, and we have built something real here. The land is ours. The fence is sound. The cattle are growing. My mother used to say the world will spend a great deal of energy deciding what you're worth. Don't let it do that work for you. I didn't. I did the work myself. She put the pen down. She folded the letter, and this time, for the first time since she'd started writing these letters in Kansas City, she didn't set it aside. She went to the bedroom doorway. Nathan was there half awake, and he turned when he heard her. "Come to bed," he said. She set the letter on the small table by the window, where the morning light would fall on it, and she went. Clara Whitmore had arrived with nothing. She had built everything, and the woman nobody chose had become the woman a good man was proud to call his own.